everyone. This is Music Mukbang. My name is Zoe, and today we are talking to Yaoundé Boxing Club. Hello, how are you?
I'm very good, thanks. How are you?
Good.
Yeah.
So, you just recently played a show, correct? Can you tell me a little bit about how that show went, what it was like for people that weren't able to attend?
I did. So I was opening it for an artist called Eden Rain, who's
Mhm.
amazing. I recommend checking out. I was opening it for her and it was really great. It was at a London venue called the Folklore, people who know. Really chill venue. And yeah, it was really cool. The vibe was amazing.
Yeah. Do you remember kind of compared to like the shows you've been doing now and stuff, what your first show was like?
I remember it very vividly actually. It was I'm from France originally, so it was like a French a hometown kind of gig, and it was put on by like kind of like the regions, like the city and everything. They kind of put that on for like young people to have
Mhm.
a stage to kind of perform on. And
Cool.
I remember all my family coming, all my friends coming and everything, and it was honestly amazing actually because the place was like full,
Yeah.
which isn't quite like isn't quite normal actually. Usually my in my hometown, but yeah, the place was just full, packed, absolutely, and it was just great. Yeah.
And did you grow up playing music? Was that like something that was pretty prominent in your household?
So yes and no, like my parents are big music fans, so there was always like music playing in the house for sure. All types of music as well. But then none of my like family is like a musician, if that makes sense. Nobody in
Hmm.
my family, yeah, plays any instrument or anything like that. So no, I did kind of pick that up on my own. So when I was 12, I moved to Cameroon, which is
Hmm.
my other country, and I kind of saw it as like a fresh start. So I decided to like take on guitar, and yeah, I started playing the guitar then.
Cool. And what sorts of things did you listen to growing up, either genres or specific artists?
Um, oh, a lot of things. So obviously my parents' stuff, which was like a lot of Tracy Chapman, then a lot of like various African music, a lot of like my mom was a big like Linkin Park fan,
Yeah.
actually, big Coldplay fan as well. So that sort of thing, very yeah, a lot of stuff. Then when I was around like 9, 10, I discovered hip hop, so I started listening to like a lot of hip hop. Then a lot of rock, everything that was in Disney Channel as well. I was like a big Disney Channel fan. So all the music that was there. Then when I was like a teen, I started getting into like pop punk. I had a bit of like an emo phase.
As
So
we
a lot
all
of
do,
pop
right?
punk, yeah, exactly. That kind of emo stuff. And yeah, now I'm kind of like listening to everything all at once, really.
Awesome. I totally feel you on the Linkin Park. That was
Yeah,
definitely my dad would play that growing up
yeah.
as well. So, um, what would you say is the major like, well, at what point did you move to the UK? Where was that like in pursuit of music career is why you moved? Okay.
Kind of, yeah. So I was 18 when I moved here. And at first I was actually an au pair because I wanted to have a gap year
Mhm.
between finishing high school and then obviously starting my studies. And so it's just a big like in some African families, like in my family, for example, I know that it's kind of is a tradition to study abroad for some reason. Like it's just I don't know, it's kind of seen as like prestigious and everything. So in my
Mhm.
mind, when it was about studying, I never saw myself studying in France. It was a little bit always about studying abroad, wherever it could be. So I chose London actually after visiting it in the summer, and I just yeah. At first, I was an au pair because I mean I hadn't signed up for anything. I hadn't so I didn't have anything at all. So I just needed something to just stay in London basically. So I
Yeah,
became an au pair, and then yeah, I signed up for university and eventually studied there. Yeah,
that's
but a lot of
insane.
it was yeah, like it was obviously it was kind of like a strategic choice. Obviously, I had to study and everything, but then it was also about my music career. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And was there anything that was difficult about kind of getting into the music scene and like kind of starting to play gigs and making music? while you were there?
Um, a little bit. I mean, I'm very much an introverted person. So
Mhm.
in a city like London, it's very hard because something that they don't really tell you is that it's actually hard to make friends like in a big city,
Yeah.
which is a bit of a paradox, isn't it? But it's just very hard because everybody's so focused on their things. They already got their, circles of friends. So if you don't go towards people, they're not gonna come towards you, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
So that was that, first of all. It's very hard to network when you're not a very social person. And then but then I was very lucky because I met my manager, George. Very early on. I was like 19, so like a year after moving to the UK. I met him, and he's a show promoter, so he puts on shows and everything. So it was I was very lucky in that sense because I was able to play gigs very early on, which was great.
Yeah. He's great.
Yeah, amazing. Shout out George.
Shout out. Um, so what did you study at university?
I studied business management and entrepreneurship.
Gotcha.
Um, at first I wanted to study film at first, and then I realized that business management and entrepreneurship was more of a practical thing to have, which
Yeah.
is still useful in my career now.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and do you notice it helping you in any
Yeah,
particular way?
yeah, a lot. When it comes to like I don't know, like when there's like contracts or involved, or any sort of like I don't know, money to be made, stuff like that. Basically, whenever there's like a money talk or anything, like I'm able to understand and to
Yeah.
be able to stand up for myself if needed as well. So that's really great to have.
Well, and I think that's so important because it's
Yeah,
like, yes, obviously you have a fantastic manager, but for
yeah,
your own, peace of mind and uh
yeah,
understanding, I feel like that's a great thing to be able to
yeah, yeah.
have like a higher level conversation with execs
Mm-hmm.
and have a higher level conversation
Yeah,
with your manager too. So
absolutely.
cool.
Yeah.
So you have your new single,
Mm-hmm.
Snakes,
Yeah.
one of a few that you're going to release this year. Can
Yes.
you tell me a little bit about what the process was like for that song?
So it's super funny. I was that so in London and a few other like cities in the world, there's like a Spotify studio kind of. So if you're like an artist or like a songwriter, producer, or anything like that, you can basically request a free session every once in a while.
Cool.
And so in London, it's at Metropolis Studios, which is like a big studio in West London. And so I was at that studio for a notable session, that's what they call it. And so I remember I didn't really have any. The problem with me is because I produce everything that I make, sometimes I don't always get to that stage where I have like a fully fledged song. It
Hmm.
takes me a bit of a while because I always want to like touch things on the production and then, have the production be perfect before I record and everything. So I don't really have demos ready for people, which is a bit long. But so George was kind of like pressing me, oh yeah, we need a song today. We need like a one song at least that you can finish today because it's important. We need to be able to send it to people and stuff because people are asking for it. And so I was working on the song at first and it wasn't getting anywhere. So at some point I was just like, do you know what? I have an old idea. I'm just gonna open it up and just see what comes. And the instrumental was the instrumental for Snakes. So I started just working on it, polishing the guitars, and then just making it as loud as possible. Then I recorded the verses. Writing the song was super easy. I mean, the song is very basic sounding, if that makes sense. It's not very like it's not my best written song, if that makes sense. But I think it's quite efficient still and quite catchy, which is the most important in my opinion.
Yeah.
And fun fact, George actually engineered that song. So
Oh,
again, shout
really?
out to George. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so, I mean, I feel like that's not necessarily a bad thing when it comes to music. And there's always going to be like, for each artist, I feel like there's always going to be like a song that's super complex in
Yeah.
terms of lyrics and maybe one that's a bit more like catchy and all that
Yeah.
stuff. But it's a great song. And I think it's clear that people are really loving it.
Yeah.
So,
True.
um, you produce everything yourself. How did you, or
Most
well,
of it. Not
most of
everything,
it,
but most of it.
most
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
How? how did you get into that? What made you decide that you wanted that to be a part of your skill set as an artist?
So I didn't really decide it actually. I kind of had to. I'm from Limoges, which is a kind of rural town in like central southwestern France.
Okay.
So it's like it's gotten bigger now, but back in my day, it wasn't like that big. You didn't really have many people. It's kind of like it's a city, but it's a very small city in the sense that you know everybody. Everybody knows your
Yeah.
business and all that. If that makes sense. So, growing up, I was obviously an introvert, so I wasn't really going towards people. And then it was also just the people making music in my area were mainly making hip hop.
Mhm.
Um, and so I don't know, I just didn't know any people and I was very young, so I couldn't really approach anyone. So I was
Yeah.
just in my room and I was just trying to make music basically. And so I just had to learn production basically. So I watched a lot of YouTube tutorials and then I don't know, I kind of got good at it, eventually just wanting to only do that if that makes sense. And now I have the opportunity to work with other producers, but for some reason I'm not always a big fan of it because it's just not the way that I'm used to do it.
Yeah.
I've gotten used to like doing things myself, so I'm just pleased with how like it's going now. So
Yeah. And I think it's just a different type of build in that you can see everything that goes into it. And I think, obviously every producer and everyone that produces has a different style to it. So it's like it's your style. You're
yeah,
obviously going to feel most comfortable
exactly.
with it.
Yeah.
Um, do you have a song that is either most meaningful to you or one that you're most proud of that you've made?
I would say that I have two. The first one being Oceans. Oceans was like the first song I released under this name, Yaoundé Boxing Club. It's the first song I wrote as well upon arriving to London. And so it's very personal and it's like it came after like I had a year-long writer's block.
Mhm.
So it's very meaningful because like it was the song that kind of cured this writer's block. And also, I don't know, it's just it touches on like a very personal subject and it's just I don't know how I wrote it, but even now to this day, I still think it's like one of the best things I've ever written. And then Young is a close second. I wrote this in my last year of university. I was completely burnt out, and
Mhm.
so this song really came from the heart because it was like just so raw and just completely representative of the state that I was in at the time. So yeah, yeah, definitely these two.
Yeah, for sure. The name
Mm-hmm.
YAOUNDÉBOXINCLUB,
Mm-hmm.
where did that come from?
So when I was 17, I picked up boxing.
Mhm.
And I remember I told my uncle on my dad's side, and he told me that my grandpa actually owned a boxing gym back in the day. And that's something I never knew. I mean, I didn't know that my grandpa actually boxed or anything like that, and
Right.
I never knew. So he told me that, and I was like, I told my grandpa afterwards, and so he was like, oh, that's great, that's amazing actually, because yeah, I used to box, I used to have a boxing gym and everything, and so that's like one of the things we bonded on, like uh prior to his death. So he passed away not too long afterwards. And so yeah, that was just one of the things that kind of brought us closer before that. So it was kind of like I don't know, it's kind of like a tribute to like him, my family, and my roots to a great extent, really.
Yeah. That's beautiful. And I think, obviously it kind of grounds and it's not just, I mean, obviously like everyone's name has meaning to it, but it's
Yeah,
an additional name that also has meaning. So I think
yeah.
that's really, really,
Mm.
really awesome. US before that's I'm
I
curious.
have, yes, actually, I have some family in Maryland. Yeah,
Okay, gotcha. So from I feel like a lot of artists they're like, okay, like LA or New York, like that's the place to
yeah.
be or the um hot spot. What would you say is the biggest difference in terms of music in the US compared to the UK for you and your perception of it?
Oh, that's a very good question. That's something we often talk about, like, as musicians, like in the UK and even like when talking with Americans. I think the US is much more musical in a way because it's really
Mm,
ingrained in the culture.
yeah,
Like one example of that is really like when talking about like an R&B singer, for example, like most R&B singers grew up in the church.
yeah,
And like you guys have that in like your religious in a religious aspect, but then also a cultural aspect where everybody always had like a band in high school or like I don't know, music is pretty much everywhere, if that makes sense. And here
mhm,
in the UK, obviously they have a much more musical culture than France, for example, but it's nowhere near as like as much as in the US.
uh-huh.
So like I think the difference, yeah, lies here. It's really just like about appreciating the music, and just I don't know, like when it comes to the UK as well though, the one thing is that there's much more experimentation, I believe.
Okay.
Like people are much more experimental. You always hear some kind of weird thing that's in London, like, but then in the US, I think the focus is really put on like the polished aspect of it, but then there's
Mhm.
also experimentation as well. So I don't know. I would say the difference is really, in the US, music is really everywhere. So where either even if you go to like how can I say that? I'm sorry. I'm just waffling a bit. Sorry.
You're good.
So I would say like whether you're in New York or like I don't know a small town in the middle of Colorado, for example, there's
Mhm.
going to be a scene basically. There's going to be a music scene. There's going to be an audience, people wanting to listen. Here in the UK, everything is also very much like in London or in Manchester
Gotcha.
or maybe in Glasgow. But it's going to be very like you have a lot of people coming from abroad, like from everywhere, even from like Scotland, from Ireland to London, because it's very hard to make it when you're not in like that kind of like hub.
Interesting.
Whereas in the US, you have a lot of people, a lot of bands that are based in like non-big cities and
Yeah.
that are able to like make a living off their music by touring and just releasing music. So
Yeah, that's a good point. I think so. UK is a bit more centralized in terms of the
yes, exactly.
areas where people can thrive. But, and I definitely agree. I do see this a lot in the US where it's like there are different levels to like the, I don't know what would be the right word for it, I guess acknowledgement
Yeah.
of the band or of the style of music. Um, so yeah, totally, totally agree with
Yeah, and it's a very, I think what's happening in London is a very just European thing. It's the same in like France as well. Everything is in Paris and everything is pretty much in the capital. That's a very European thing. But yeah, in the US, I feel like you can kind of thrive everywhere. You just have to like find the formula for it.
yeah, for sure. Um, so you've done a lot of shows since you've, stepped into
Mm.
this role as an artist. Do you have a dream venue, either in the UK or in the US, wherever, that you would like to play?
Yes, in the UK, definitely the O2. I think people know it's just I think it's the best venue in London for sure, and in the UK as a whole as well. Wembley is nice as well, but it's a stadium, so it's a bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And then in France, for sure, being French, Stade de France, it's like so that's a stadium, but it's like a massive stadium. It's just when you're able to like fill it out, it's honestly a big feat.
Yeah,
And then in the US, I guess, I mean, that's going to sound very cliche, but Madison Square Garden, honestly, it's like
yeah.
one of the biggest venues in the world for sure.
Iconic, why not, right?
Yeah.
So what is next for you? Is there anything exciting that you want to let people know about?
Yes, I'm going to be playing a couple gigs actually. I've got one gig coming up on 26th of July. That's going to be cool. Camden Assembly in London, for those who know. And then it's in Teba as well. I'm going to have like 3 shows, which is amazing. And then I'm just excited to like be releasing more music by the end of the year. And then 2024 as well is going to come in full swing, and we're going to be ready for it.
Exciting. Lots to come. Do you have a favorite thing about performing live?
I think, yeah, actually, being able to like kind of transform the songs as you wish, if that makes sense. So obviously there's like a pseudo version, but for me, what I really like is when artists kind of go out their way and really make the live version, yeah, sound completely different. One artist that does it well is John Bellion. Like
Mhm.
his live version sounds so different from the studio versions, and I think that's just amazing because it's like a whole new different song that's coming to life, and it has
Yeah.
the energy as well for live music, so it's great.
Yeah, that's what I've heard is that at his live shows, it's almost like he's producing live on
Yes,
stage, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Pretty
yeah.
much.
And I guess, I mean, Ed Sheeran kind of does that too with like the
It's
pedal
wow.
and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah,
Mhm.
where he's like
Yeah.
recording it live on stage. Cool.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. Just kind of like reimagining the song right in front of our eyes. That's a crazy, crazy performance, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's all about, and I've talked about this with people before of like you're creating a whole new experience for someone
Yes, exactly.
outside of the listening. And I think that's obviously like very special too, because people that maybe don't do as many shows or they've never done a show and they just do stuff online,
Yeah.
it can be a little bit trickier to kind of create a different experience in that way.
Yes.
So very, very cool.
It's definitely a
Um,
process. Yeah. You have to find like your feet and like have to find the right musicians as well to do it with, which
yeah,
can be hard and tricky. But once you've got it, it's amazing, honestly.
yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Cool. So, anything else before we wrap up here?
Thank you so much for having me. Honestly, it was
Yeah,
great chatting to you, and yeah, looking forward to seeing what you did with the platform as well. Releasing some
thank
music
you. Thank you
coming
so
up.
much. Where can everyone find you? Which platforms, which username?
So they can find me on Instagram at Yaoundé Boxing Club. So that's YAOUNDE Boxing Club, and then Twitter YDE Boxing Club. YouTube Yaoundé Boxing Club as well. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.